What if I told you that behind one of gospel's strongest voices was a man slowly breaking, a man who stood in front of thousands with a smile and thunder in his voice, but behind the curtain was fighting a war that almost no one dared to speak about? Bishop G.E. Patterson wasn't just another preacher. He was the preacher, a symbol of hope, power, and faith. But you won't believe what Bishop T.D. Jakes just revealed about him. Let me tell you, this isn't a story about sermons or songs. This is a story about secrets, deep, hidden truths that were carefully covered for years until now. It all began with a simple statement from T.D. Jakes. He said, "We all knew." Just 4 words, but they shook everything. What did he mean? Who knew? And more importantly, what were they hiding? That's where it gets interesting. You see, Bishop G.E. Patterson was always seen as strong. His voice filled rooms, his presence demanded respect. But behind that strength, he was battling in silence. And the craziest part, the people closest to him were part of that silence. They saw it, they lived it, but they never spoke. Until now, T.D. Jakes said something that caught everyone off guard. He admitted that Patterson's struggles were known in private circles. These weren't rumors, they were real, heavy, painful battles that were locked behind closed doors. The public never saw it because they weren't allowed to. But here is the shocking part. While people were shouting amen in the pews, Bishop Patterson was sometimes too weak to stand. Yes, too weak to stand. His body was hurting, his health was declining, but he still walked up to that pulpit like nothing was wrong. Because in his world, showing weakness wasn't an option. What makes this story different is that this wasn't just about one man's health. This was about a system, a whole structure that expected perfection from a man who was quietly breaking. Patterson's health issues weren't small. According to those close to him, he dealt with serious conditions that made preaching and traveling difficult, but nobody dared to tell the world. He kept going because that's what people expected. He carried a nation's faith on his back, even when his own strength was fading. And the pressure didn't stop there. There were leadership conflicts too. People inside the church disagreed with him, argued with him, challenged him. And while the outside world only saw unity, the inside was filled with tension. T.D. Jakes said that Patterson had to fight battles with other church leaders. Some of them didn't like the way he led. Some didn't support his vision. These weren't small disagreements. These were the kind of clashes that shook the peace inside the ministry. And yet, no one on the outside ever knew because Patterson never let it show. But let me tell you, spiritual warfare was the heaviest burden he carried. According to Bishop Jakes, this wasn't just stress or conflict. It was a deep, constant battle within Patterson's soul. He fought doubts. He fought fear. He fought moments where his faith felt like it was slipping, and still he preached like nothing was wrong. That's the part no one talks about. We see pastors on stage and think they're invincible, but they're not. They're human. And sometimes the ones who look the strongest are the ones fighting the hardest battles alone. Destiny took an unexpected turn when these private struggles began to grow. Patterson's health began to slow him down, but he refused to stop. His leadership became harder to manage, yet he never stepped back, and his spiritual battles kept growing deeper. Still, he showed up week after week, preaching, singing, smiling. But the truth was slowly killing him from the inside. And all the people who knew, including Bishop Jakes, stayed silent for years because that's how the system worked. Hide the pain, protect the image. While the public held Bishop G.E. Patterson up as a spiritual giant, his family lived a much different reality behind closed doors. You won't believe the kind of pressure they carried. Let me tell you, his wife, his children, his closest assistants, they were all trapped in a world where image came first and truth had no room. Every time Patterson's health failed him, they had to scramble to cancel plans, rearrange schedules, and still make it all look effortless because one mistake, one slip, could destroy the illusion of strength the world expected from him. One family friend finally spoke, anonymously, of course, and said something that stuck. We were always one bad day away from the truth coming out. That's how fragile the whole situation was. And yet, no one ever cracked. That's the craziest part. They protected him with everything they had, but at what cost? Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Those leadership conflicts we mentioned earlier, they didn't just stay in the church boardrooms, they followed Patterson home. The disagreements, the stress, the frustration, it spilled into his personal life. He would leave meetings feeling broken, misunderstood, even betrayed. And then he'd have to turn around, put on a suit, and deliver a powerful sermon like nothing happened. His wife saw it, his kids saw it, but they never said a word. Because in their world, silence was safety. But here's the shocking part. This silence, this choice to never speak, came with a heavy emotional price. Patterson's family wasn't just supporting a preacher, they were carrying the weight of a collapsing man. They had to watch someone they loved sacrifice his body, his peace, and his mental health, all in the name of keeping up the image of a perfect leader. There were nights, insiders say, where he barely had the strength to speak. But Sunday morning, he still showed up, still preached like a storm, because people were counting on him, and he refused to disappoint. What makes this story different is that this wasn't about scandal or secret sins. No, this was about human pain covered by spiritual pressure. T.D. Jakes said it clearly. We must stop pretending our leaders are invincible. And he's right, because while the church community kept praising Patterson's strength, the man inside was slowly disappearing. Let me tell you something that very few people know. There were moments when Patterson almost gave up, when the physical pain became too much, when the leadership pressure became unbearable, when the spiritual battles felt like they were winning. But each time he chose to stay silent for the sake of his church, his people, and his calling. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. He didn't suffer because he had to. He suffered because he thought it was the only way to remain respected. Destiny took another unexpected turn when Patterson's silence became the very thing that isolated him the most. The people who could have helped him were kept in the dark, and the people who knew chose to stay quiet. And even though he kept preaching, recording music, and inspiring millions, behind that smile was a man who was worn down, tired, and desperately in need of rest. And this leads us to one painful question. Could things have been different if someone had just spoken up sooner? Could his health have improved, his mind been stronger, his spirit been lifted, if he didn't feel the need to carry everything alone? T.D. Jakes believes the answer is yes. But that answer came far too late. After years of silence, Bishop T.D. Jakes finally said what many had only whispered behind closed doors. We all knew. That one sentence opened a floodgate. It wasn't just a personal confession. It was an admission that something had been deeply wrong within the gospel leadership for years. Let me tell you, it shook people. Because if someone like T.D. Jakes, one of the most respected leaders in the faith world, knew about Patterson's suffering all along, then who else knew and said nothing? This is where it gets interesting. Jakes didn't just talk about Patterson's struggles. He used them to shine a light on a much bigger issue, a culture of silence, perfection, and pressure that's been buried deep inside the church for decades. He said that many spiritual leaders today are wearing masks of perfection, forced to hide their pain out of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of being seen as weak, fear of losing respect. And the craziest part, this culture is so strong that even a giant like Patterson couldn't escape it. According to Jakes, this pressure comes not just from inside the church, but from the outside too. In today's world, pastors aren't just spiritual leaders. They're public figures, cultural voices, social influencers. Every word they say is judged. Every mistake is magnified. And for Patterson, that spotlight was always shining. So he couldn't afford to stumble. even once. That pressure didn't just exhaust him, it consumed him. But here is the shocking part. Bishop Jakes said Patterson wasn't the only one. He hinted that many respected gospel leaders have similar stories: silent suffering, secret battles, hidden pain, and the sad truth: most of these stories will never be told because the church isn't ready to hear them. And many leaders are too afraid to speak. Let me ask you something. What happens when strength becomes a prison? When leaders are praised for being unbreakable, even when they're clearly breaking. That's what Patterson experienced. He had no space to be weak, no freedom to say, "I'm not okay." And that's what made his struggle so dangerous. He became trapped in the very image people loved him for. Jake said something powerful in his speech. He said, "Transparency is not weakness, it's healing." But in Patterson's time, no one offered him that kind of healing. Instead, he was expected to just keep going, no matter how sick, no matter how tired, no matter how broken. And so he did, until he couldn't anymore. Destiny once again took an unexpected turn. What could have been a moment of breakthrough, a moment for the church to finally embrace honesty, instead turned into years of silence. Patterson's suffering was buried with him. And only now, years later, are we starting to unpack the weight of what he carried. This isn't just about G. Patterson anymore. This is about every leader who has ever stood on a pulpit with a smile while silently falling apart. It's about the heavy price of pretending to be okay. And it's about the urgent need to create a space where leaders can speak, cry, ask for help, and still be respected. After everything Bishop G.E. Patterson endured, after all the hidden battles, the silence, the pressure, his legacy still stood tall. His voice still echoes through churches. His sermons still inspire millions. But thanks to Bishop T.D. Jakes' bold confession, we now know that legacy came at a painful cost. The truth finally came forward, not to tear him down, but to show the world what he really endured. And let me tell you, that truth is not just powerful, it's necessary, because what makes this story different is that it reveals the human side of leadership. G.E. Patterson was more than a preacher. He was a husband, a father, a man who needed rest, healing, and support. Just like anyone else, he wasn't weak because he struggled. He was strong because he kept going despite the pain. But here's the shocking part. That strength should have never had to be carried alone. T.D. Jakes is now calling for a full shift in how the church treats its leaders. He said, "We need to stop building platforms for perfect men. We need to build safe spaces for honest ones." And he's right. Because if a man like G.E. Patterson, beloved, respected, faithful, couldn't show his pain without fear, then how many others are still hiding? How many are preaching with broken hearts, smiling through mental and physical exhaustion, afraid that telling the truth will cost them everything? Let me tell you, the craziest part is this. If the church continues to ignore these hidden struggles, it's not just the leaders who suffer, it's the entire community. Because when leaders fall in silence, entire ministries fall with them. The pressure to appear perfect doesn't protect faith, it destroys it from within. That's why this story matters. That's why it needs to be told. Jakes made something else clear. He said that going forward, we need to encourage transparency, not fear it. Leaders should be allowed to say, "I'm tired." They should be able to ask for help, take a break, seek therapy, cry if they need to, without feeling like they'll lose the respect of their people. Because real strength isn't pretending, it's being real, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's the legacy we should remember. Not just G.E. Patterson, the preacher, but G.E. Patterson, the man, the one who gave everything he had, even when it was costing him silently. The one who led with fire in his voice, but pain in his body. The one who chose to stay silent for the sake of others until it was too late. So now, as the truth finally comes to light, we have a chance to do better, a chance to break the silence, to lift the mask, and to start protecting the people we look up to. Because behind every powerful sermon is a person who needs love, grace, and understanding too. And now I want to hear from you. How do you feel about all of this? Should churches do more to support their leaders emotionally, mentally, and spiritually? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If this story touched you or opened your eyes, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more deep and real gospel stories, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the truth is the only thing powerful enough to heal. And remember, every leader is human, and their story matters.